Hey, what's going on, everybody? So, as most of you may know, I spent most of my career as a Navy SEAL and ended up retiring in 2019. But the best piece of advice I got when I was a new guy in the SEAL teams from a great mentor of mine was those who fail to prepare, prepare to fail. And that's the mindset we kept whether we were in training or doing real world operations. And since I retired in 2019, I still try to keep up with that mindset, making sure I can take care of myself and my family in no matter what situations occur. And that is why I partnered up with My Patriot Supply. Since 2008, My Patriot Supply has helped millions of Americans gear up for emergencies. Today, their popular 4-week emergency food kits can't stay out of customers' carts. You can get yours today at my website, preparewitheddy.com, and save $50 on each one plus free shipping. These 4-week emergency food kits come with over 2,000 calories per day and last up to 25 years. So get yours now at preparewitheddy.com. Once again, that is preparewitheddy.com. Thank you and God bless.
Welcome back to Shoot Me Straight. We have an awesome episode for you today. We have Chief Gavin Rowe and Chief Brett Boyer, both Navy divers, and we got connected through Dan O'Shea, or at least he reached out to me, sort of gave me a brief overview of what you guys are doing, and then Nicole Smith is who I had talked to, and then we finally connected. We'll get into what you guys are doing, but first, let's go ahead and get to know you guys a little bit. I know you guys are both Navy divers. But get a little bit of your background and why you guys decided to join the Navy and sort of lead the path where you guys are now. So I'll let whichever one of you guys wants to start first.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, man, it's an honor.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, so Chief Navy Diver. I'm coming up on 14 years. Dad was a service member. He was in the Navy. My grandpa was as well, so it seemed like a
Generational.
A natural choice. My brother went on the other course. He chose Air Force, so good on him. But I've been overseas in Guam for 6 years. I did a salvage tour in Virginia, which was super rewarding, and I got to train students at the dive school here in Panama City. I'm currently at the Surface Warfare Unit, where we do some of the testing and R&D for that.
What year did you come in?
I came in 2010, so I graduated high school. I tried the college thing for a little bit and figured out that wasn't for me. And I wanted to travel as well as serve.
Yeah.
So I had an interest in diving. My dad and I both dove. I think I was 10 years old when I started. So I actually didn't know Navy diving was a thing until I think it was like my second time at the recruiter office when he's like, yeah, you can do, here's SEALs. They do this diving thing. And we also have Navy diver. And I was like, what is that? And, did the PST, the physical screening test for that, and got accepted after my 4th time at MEPS. And, as I was finishing dive school, one of the funny things that happened early on is, when you're in those training pipelines, you don't really know where you're going to go until you finish the pipeline, and then it's kind of a pecking order of how you placed in that class. So I remember calling my mom probably a couple weeks prior to graduating that curriculum. And I said, hey, I'm going overseas to Guam. I picked the furthest spot I could have thought of. Not many people know where Guam is either. It's a 30-mile island, right? But I actually ended up getting orders to Guam. So I got to call her back the second time when I graduated. And I was like, remember when I called you and I made that joke? Yeah, that wasn't a joke.
So you spent, 3 years in Guam?
I spent 3 years in Guam. I went to Virginia. Did some salvage work, and then I went back to Guam, and I worked at a hyperbaric medical chamber where we treated all the active duty and civilian dive casualties. I transferred to the Navy dive school, did 3.5 years there, and put me at my current command, which is the Surface Warfare Unit.
And those are right next to each other?
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So, yeah, you didn't have to move out of this area. Well played.
Right.
How was, let's go with you.
So I'm Chief Brett Boyer, Navy diver. I got in back in 2009. I was an athlete, kind of ruined some of those opportunities in college. I graduated from the University of Missouri in 2008, but I worked as a junior engineer for the Power of New Mexico for a subcontractor in Deming, New Mexico, and it's fine. Nobody knows where that is.
Yeah.
I didn't either. So I worked down there, but like I said, I had a little bit of a past, so I like to, party a little bit too hard, and got fired from the job site. They said you're gonna move to Louisiana. I said, yeah, I'm gonna go join the Navy. That's a true story. Said I was gonna be a pilot. Well, here I am, a Navy diver. Back at that time in 2009 when I got in, I mean, everybody was trying to get in, whether because of instability, because of coming out of college to one of the worst recessions we've ever had. And but I wanted to kind of turn it around for myself and my family, and joined then.
How old were you at the time?
So at the time, let's see, 2009. I mean, let's see, 85, 23.
Okay.
And you were married?
I wasn't married, and that's another funny story because I met my wife because I came in as an AT because I was going to put an officer's package in and go be a flyboy, right? And I met my wife at a gas station in Pensacola, and then we've been now married for almost 15 years.
Wow.
Nice.
Since then,
Was she pumping gas, and you were just like,
she was actually inside the store. I was talking to her friend. For one of my, scared buddies inside of his truck, too afraid to come out and talk to the girl. Of course, I was sauced up a little bit and, had all the courage in the world. My wife comes walking out. I think I did something to the effect of like, excuse me, my future wife is walking out of the door right now. True story.
Called it.
And yeah, and actually we had known each other for 2.5 to almost 3 months, and we were married by, I was on lunch break. We got married that way, and had some of her friends actually document, our license, and that's what happened. And if my kids do that, I'll kill them because I have 2 girls, so you better not. All right.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I got in as an AT. That was not the life for me.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was.
I can imagine from wanting to be a flyboy, that was one of your options, and then going to AT.
Flyboy, AT.
AT. So an AT is an aviation electronics technician. Now, the dream that was sold to me is, hey, you get in there, you show them what you're worth,
Oh yeah.
and you get the best, which I did. I was #1 EP, all that good stuff, right? And we had this thing called PTS, which is we called prepare to separate back in the day, but it was prepare to serve, perform to serve. That's right. But I was the #1 EP, but yet they said I needed to pick a different job. So no offense, SEAL's not my thing. Too much running, too little sleep, and plus the whole getting shot thing was kind of not my thing. But I still wanted to be somewhat cool.
Yeah.
So I picked the Navy diver thing. I too didn't know what it was. Went to dive school in 2012, and found out quickly what that was all about. I had a pretty tough team. They were beating us down pretty good. 2 days, all that good stuff, right?
Yeah. Getting you in shape.
Oh man, I went in there at 215. I left at 185.
Wow.
It was fun to say the least. We had just like anybody else, we had our accession rate. I think it was like 86% of my class. I started out with 48, and we ended up with 4. Whatever the math is on that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, diving training's it's difficult. I think civilians might look at it as like, oh yeah, diving, like you just go get your certification and go dive around. Well, yeah, on the civilian world, when you're paying money to get your certification, and like obviously the instructors you have are going to make sure everything's comfortable and good. Yeah. But the military especially the Navy has a fine way of taking the fun out of a lot of things and making it difficult, which is done on purpose. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, Navy dive school has been notorious for being very challenging, and you got to be in shape, you got to be intelligent, you got to be calm. Underwater.
Yeah, most things that just any of those, EOD, diver, SWIC, SEAL. I think SEAL's going to be kind of the. I'm not going to say that. Never mind.
What's that?
Go ahead. I was going to say, the pinnacle of it because of that Hell Week.
It's the tip of the spear.
Well,
they like to sell themselves as such. Believe me.
I know I bought the book. Yeah, did that, and went to ship's husbandry, which is in Kings Bay, Georgia. It's about 45 minutes north of Jacksonville, and we just worked on nuclear subs, which was a pretty cool honor. We did some really good jobs, making sure that those guys are getting out to sea, and some SDV operations. The same goes with that.
STV.
That's
SDV is a sealed delivery
yep.
vehicle, right? So these guys are going to go out in this vehicle, go do some hush stuff, and come back to the submarine and beat feet.
Like a mini sub.
Yeah, it's like a little mini sub. I mean, you can look it up online. It's
Okay.
Yeah,
it's
it's
Google SDV. We're not talking about anything classified. Obviously, there's more in depth to it if you really went down the rabbit hole, and then you'd go into some classified stuff. But
Gotcha.
yeah, it's a way to deliver SEALs. To a lot of it is reconnaissance, and they go take pictures, gather reconnaissance, then come back. But it is thank God I never had to do that. To me, I'm like, that sounds like a miserable job.
I too did not do that because having worked on submarines, then you have to think you're going to be underway anywhere from a month to 3 months. They don't get port calls very often.
No.
So you're down there and it smells like old French fries. It's something else. Hey, my hat goes off to the submariners out there.
Yeah, that's a
Thank you for
special
your
breed.
You stay
to
3 months in a submarine.
Yeah, so I mean they'll come up, from time to time. I don't pretend to know exactly when they come up and surface and do all that, but I know that it's not exactly the most glamorous job in the world.
No.
Wow.
So did that in Kings Bay. Went on to Fort Story, Virginia, where I worked with EOD. We were doing kind of the C school, which is the further on school from A school to C school, which is more a specific type event, but we were also training, people of the salvage teams to go out and do their job. From there, I went to San Diego, where I also did a salvage tour. I stayed there almost for 5 years because that was my thing. I like going out and picking something up, that people couldn't get to. But then I ended up at the dive school, and that's currently where I'm at. I've been in there 2 years, and that's been a different side. To being on that different side of the ass beatings is
Yeah.
it's nice, but it also kind of gets you. There's a little PTSD of the things that you had to do when you were there in that spot, and see the pain on their faces.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely it's weird being on the other side.
It is.
When I became a first phase instructor, like in 2010 or 11, I forget. But even when I got my orders to go there, and I hadn't been back to first phase. I've been just doing platoon after platoon and just walking. I remember going to check in and walking across that grinder as a SEAL and still you're nervous. You're dude, you feel like you're a student again.
You look out the window and you're like, oh, they saw me.
Yeah. Yeah. I even checked in, the rest of the SEALs were in there. I'm like, I'm checking in for, the orders. And they're like, they knew it because everyone else feels the same way. So they were messing with me. They're like, drop. And you're just like, oh, shit. But I found it probably to be one of the most rewarding duty stations. I went there kicking and screaming, first off. Did not want to do it. But going there and being able to put guys through, being able to hold the standard, and being like, this is what, was the standard was held for me when I went through, and I'm going to do the same. And just, I think the best reward I get from it is guys that I put through, because, you put through, I think I put through 10 classes, so you obviously, you don't know barely anybody.
Sure.
But having guys come up and be like, hey, thank you for holding the standard as an instructor, even though, because half the time I'm like, I wonder if these guys hate me, or think I'm a dick. But that's part of the gig is, you're not there to pass out cookies and be like, hey, good job. It's, no, you better meet the requirements and the standard. And if you don't, you're gone. Yeah. Simple as that.
Molding your replacement.
Exactly.
So were you one of the ones riding in a golf cart, yelling at them on the speaker, drinking?
No, I did everything with them.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did I made it a. It was when I made sure when I was there, I was like, you got to lead by example. And there are instructors that go out there and, yell and tell them to do push-ups and, direct them to do things. But if you as an instructor go out there and be like, nope, let's go. You're going with me. You do the push-ups with them. You do all the PT with them. I did every O course, 2 mile ocean swims again. I mean, that's how you garner the respect of the students first off, because then they're like, okay, this guy's not full of shit. But it also is an example for them, like, this doesn't end here. Just because you make it past this course, this is the lifestyle.
Yep.
Also, it shows them too. It's like, hey, this guy in his 30s,
Exactly.
or whatever age you were, this guy is beating me probably in most cases. You know, we need to put out.
Yeah.
Give 100%. You always see the sandbaggers that come in and skate under the radar, but that motivates them too when you do it with them.
Exactly. And
So
the students know who the sandbaggers are. The students know who the crappy instructors are. I mean,
So you almost went to the buds like 10 times? 10
no,
more
I
times?
let
mean,
me,
you didn't
let
do
me
Hell Week.
go
I
ahead
guess.
and I didn't. It's not like I sat there with them all day, every day. It was
Sure.
I'd come out there if I conducted an evolution. So if I was in charge of the 4-mile time run that day, I'd go do the 4-mile time run with them. If I
Dang.
was leading PT, I led most of the conditioning runs because I like to run, and most of the instructors didn't. And so I was like, hey, I'll do it.
Bingo.
And yeah, if I did the O course, 2-mile ocean swims, I would. If I was in charge, I'm like, I'm going to do it with you. And I expected, I was like, I'm going to beat everybody here. I'd let them know, but it's like your goal is to beat me, which keeps them, and then you reward them. It's if they did beat me, then guess what? You get like a little break on the side while everybody else
5-minute
gets
break.
beat. Yeah.
I remember back in 2010, it's an interesting space where the dive school is, or the base in general. When you think of Florida, you always think of hot and 90 degrees, 100 degrees, but Panama City, as both of you know, we get cold weather.
Oh yeah.
In 2010, when I came through here, we had record lows. I want to say it hit 27 to 28 degrees. And our training team at the time, who I work with some of them now, they're civilians, and at the command I'm at. But we would have to do base swims, 1,000 meter, 2,000 meter base swims.
3,000, 4,000.
And there was ice on the ground. So you had to earn your wetsuit. You just didn't get a wetsuit right off the bat. You had to earn that. So when we showed up, we didn't get wetsuits. And I remember being on the boat ramp, in UDTs, which is a very short,
Sexy
tan
tan shorts.
Oh, yeah.
and a white shirt, just shaking. I probably weighed 130 pounds, just shaking and telling myself, like, man, when is this going to end? And what actually motivated me through those hard times in dive school, and I'm sure you had similar stories through BUD/S, is knowing that your teammates or your class were there with you going through the same hardship.
Oh,
and
for
pain
sure.
and the struggle you were. And also kind of realizing you didn't know when it was going to end, but you knew it was going to end at some point, and just trying to get to the completion of that evolution. But
Yeah.
27-degree base swims, ice on the ground, uphill both ways.
Yep.
Back in my day.
Yeah. Back in my day.
Way easier now.
Yeah. Not like these kids have it now. No, that's awesome. For the people listening, like, so for Navy divers, when you guys give like a brief of like, what is the job of a Navy diver?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a pretty diverse skill set. So like I mentioned before, we have our ship's husbandry type portion where we will do outside work as far as replacing props or APUs, auxiliary power units that will do the secondary props and all that kind of stuff. So if in case hey, our main for a submarine, our main prop went down. Hey, we got a secondary, or SPM is what we call it. We can at least limp home. So we do some of those type events. No matter where it is, we go to Diego Garcia, which is another small island, but we'll fly out there in remote areas and do some work that the sub needs in order to stay on mission.
Now you dive down and then fix it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of heavy machinery in it. There's a lot of possibly lift bags, chain falls,
Yeah.
Essentially anything below the water line. So when you look at a ship or a submarine that's floating, anything below the water line is typically what husbandry is considered.
Yeah, so sound heads, so we have passive detection systems and things of that nature. We'll work on things like that. But these are all, I mean, you're basically an underwater mechanic at that point for a submarine or a surface ship. Now, then you also have, the EOD side of the house where we'll go out with them and do, ATFP dives. We'll do.
What is that? Huh?
So an ATFP is a anti-terrorism force protection. So, anything that goes and touches a United States asset, being a ship or a vessel, we have to vet it first, right? And so, we're looking for anything that they could put on the side of it. In fact, in 2019, whenever they had that Japanese ship that was, and I can't remember the name of it because, like I said to you earlier, I'm horrible with names, with people or things. But it was on national television. You can look this stuff up for Mobile Unit 11. Went out there and looked at the limpet because it has exploited data that we can use to see who even put it on. So when they said it wasn't us, we're like, yeah, it was. So, something like that. But then we can, hook up with SEAL teams and do SDV. We're doing those kind of the SEAL delivery vehicle where we can do things with them and send that out, but we're going to operate that and maybe even pilot it.
Yeah.
But again,
so you guys have the ability to pilot the SDVs?
You can. It's very rare, but you have the ability to go out there and do the piloting.
So do they send you guys to SDV school?
Yeah, they will.
Okay, yeah. So you have that option.
Yeah. Like
that's
I said,
pretty cool.
That's the rare 5% that'll do it, but hey.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about our job is you could do a career of 20 years or even 30 years and never do the same job twice.
Wow.
Like he said, we have the categories which are our husbandry, which is like the underwater mechanic he talked about, the salvage aspect of it, bringing stuff off the bottom. You have the special warfare aspect of it, like EOD, SEAL team, plug it in with the SEAL teams, and then the training aspect of it as well. And each command you go to could be a completely different job. So
yeah, and in fact, I worked with NASA. They were doing basically they were going to have a mission where they were going to recover a capsule, and it was called the Orion, where we went out to the Pacific and ran all these evolutions with SWIC boats coming out there to help pick them up. But our job as I guess search and rescue, which was to set on apparatus for either aircraft to come pick them up or them actually to be wheeled in by the LCAC that we were on. So again,
wow.
It's pretty diverse. So
Yeah.
to say what it is.
So it's not boring.
No, it's not.
Yeah, you have plenty of options.
a lot
right?
of learning.
Yeah, that's
Well, so it's similar. I mean, you go through some of the you're more broad with SEALs, like you have all the other stuff with it, but y'all are more specialized in diving.
Yeah, I mean anything that is going to be associated with diving, we have an opportunity to try to get in on. But when we say like something like salvage, we had just here recently in Hawaii we had a P8 that fell out of the sky, and our boys went and got it out of the water. And the reason why that's significant is because there's a lot of classified material that's in there, and the government wants it back.
Yeah, for sure.
So they send us in to go collect that data.
Remember the weather balloons?
yeah.
We also collected
Navy
that.
divers.
Oh, nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and some other missions that you just can't
I say
really.
weather balloons. That's not the probably technical term of it, but
Yeah, whatever it was.
Yeah,
the mini balloons that went from one side to the other, and then were
yeah. From China.
Yeah, that's right. China. Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
No, that's awesome, man. Yeah, I mean, I always, when I was in, like, I saw you guys, like, every once in a while, and a lot of the times we had you guys running the dive chambers and stuff like that for us, but never really got like into like what all you guys can do, because everyone's on their own path. But I definitely, I mean, I knew what's that movie?
Men of Honor.
Yeah,
The only
Men of
movie that
Honor.
we have. But hey,
Cookie.
Hollywood, we would like to get maybe another movie out there here sometime soon.
That'd be great.
We got to catch up with these SEALs and
Oh, you got a long ways to go to catch up with us.
Yeah, that's like an annual type thing. You guys should have your own award show, maybe.
Oh, dude, the way things are going now in the community, I don't know about that. There's more hate going on than anything.
Let me ask this from a civilian standpoint. So it's almost like college football teams sometimes that I hear. It'll be like, oh, I'm a Marine, screw, different divisions or Army or Air Force. Do y'all have, and that's not everyone, right? Like there's people like Eddie that I've never heard him say bad thing about any division, honestly.
No, we're all on the same team.
Yes.
But
It's
with,
like friendly competition.
Is there friendly competition even within the Navy?
Of course. I mean, that's
Yeah.
how I think we're bred that way.
Yeah.
I think it's a personality
Yeah.
defect that we all have, but we all like it.
Yeah.
I think it's what builds the camaraderie.
Yeah.
Because you can have that you know, this is the best platoon, or this is the best team, or this is the best training team within the dive school, right? But it also breeds that camaraderie or a competitive spirit to, okay, well, they just did this. Let's show them who the best team is. But at the end of the day, it's, you know, one team, one fight.
Yeah. Have you ever you gotten like say an injury of like your hand or something that maybe seemed insignificant, and then until you lose that use of a pointer finger, and then you don't realize how often you use it. Yeah, that's kind of what we grow to understand is that everybody has their spot in this game.
Yep.
And to you know, say this is more important than this is kind of ridiculous, because
Well, it's ignorant.
it is.
Yeah,
It's
that's
very
all
ignorant.
it is.
And I understand that, you know, there is some there's ranking, like we're human beings. This is what we do. You know, what's cooler, what's more badass, whatever it is. You know, but you know, I definitely understand that if you don't have a great yeoman, man, a yeoman is an administrator, right? Paperwork type stuff, but they can make or break your experience, right? So if you have a great yeoman or a good administrator, man, your mind is set at ease with a lot of things, talking about wills, talking about travel pay, talking about pay in general. They can make it happen for you. So we really respect them, just like we talked about our submariners. I mean, those guys, my hats go off to them.
Oh yeah, that's
Are they a part of Navy diver?
We do have some sub squadrons. So we have one in, say, Kings Bay, which was Sub Squadron 16, where they do train some of the onboard submariners. We actually have a scuba class that comes through the dive school where we teach them the basics of scuba. It's about a 6-week course, but they continue on. And the reason why they do that is if they're on deployment and they have like a sound, right, a noise or something, well, these guys are going to go and try to, you know, check those things out. Well, they got to be, you know, somewhat
qualified.
Yeah, you know, to go handle the job, and we kind of weed them out there too, because even with scuba, things can go. In fact, it's probably one of the most dangerous things to do.
Murphy's Law. It'll happen every time.
Absolutely.
What's crazy about that scuba class is, you know, the subs, from what we've seen, is there's always a need, because they have to have that team, right? Like he was just talking about. But we typically started with a class of, you know, 20 to 28 scuba folks from various subs, and the way I imagine it on the sub is like, hey, we need 3 people. Who's going? You know, and they pick the 3 of the dudes that look like they're in shape. Yeah. Or females, actually. We've had scuba females come through as well. But the attrition rate of that curriculum, even though it's only 6 weeks, is over 50%. And, I mean, they drop like flies, and it's, you know, they're in a tube likely, probably most of the time, so they can't go out and run or they do these PT evolutions. But one of the best things about that curriculum is you take a group of people, sailors, and, you know, they're probably tired, or they're used to that sub life where they're on a sub for X amount of days where they don't see daylight, and they're kind of beat down, emotionally tired, right? And you bring them into this training aspect of, hey, this is diving, this is Navy divers, and we show them there's hardship along the way, a lot of hardship, right? But about that second or third week, you kind of see it open up in their eyes. They're like, man, is this what a good team is? Is this what camaraderie feels like? And you kind of build that sense of brotherhood or sisterhood, and you see it in that class. You know, they bond together, and they're like, man, I don't want to go back.
Yeah, well, it's because I think in order to build that camaraderie or that sisterhood, brotherhood, you have to go through some sort of suffering and pain together, right, to form that. Like, you can't, like, I can, like, take A school, for example. When you go there and you're out of boot camp, there's no, like, you're not forming any kind of camaraderie at this A school, or like, oh, we're in this together, because there's nothing really hard about it. You're just learning the job that you were given by the United States Navy. And it's, so everybody leaves there like, hey, whatever, see you when I see you. But then when you go to follow-on schools where there is some hardship, where people have to dig deep, work as a team to get through, look out for each other, that's when you start forming that camaraderie and that brotherhood or that sisterhood, and that's what makes you a tight unit, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the difference between like being a Navy diver or being in the spec war community rather than the fleet, right? You don't really get that in the fleet too much.
At least not, you know, I guess in the school aspect, but, you know, definitely if you're on deployment. And I had that unique time as far as being an AT for that, year and a half. that these guys are their challenges are in different ways. I mean, these guys are going on carriers, right? I've never been more intimidated in my life than going on a flat deck and just having all these things flying by, propellers, just things are happening, 1,000, miles per hour a second, and you're just trying to go up there and learn. And so, yeah, they have their own challenges, and that's where they start. I think they start finding their niche and finding themselves. But for me, that wasn't necessarily it. But nevertheless, my hat goes off to them as well.
Oh yeah, as long as they're taking pride in their job. You want them to take pride in their job and build that camaraderie and that esprit de corps of whatever they're doing. Because, like we talked about earlier, it's take one finger away and everything starts falling apart.
For sure.
Yeah. Have you guys spent time on ships? Like did a deployment on one?
Yeah. So I did training with most of them. Like again, I was only a year and a half for AT. But, I saw some of the Navy divers that were on board, and they were doing, the chamber operations. So that's another aspect. We do chamber operations, so recompression.
Is that when you've been down too low? And
Yes, the hyperbaric treatments, basically, we talked about for treating diving-related disorders.
Yeah, absolutely. And how much nitrogen is coming out of the body, because, again, you're pushing it as you go deeper, and then when you come back up, it's releasing into the bloodstream, which isn't always a good thing. So, and also how much partial pressure is actually, of oxygen is getting to your tissues as well, because that's what we need in order to have a metabolic process, is oxygen, right? So again, hyperbaric treatments, that's to treat diving-related injury, but in the air world, we can also treat pilot-related injuries that they have through rapid depressurization of their canopies, right? So they can also have, decompression sickness, and we can help them out with that. So they actually have chambers on board, and so I got to see some of those divers do what they do, and they kind of, they were, according, from my perspective, they're flying off in C2s to go handle whatever, and then they come back, they're lifting weights, they're running on the...
Yeah, they're the rock stars.
Oh, yeah. When I did the NASA thing, I mean, I had astronauts come and ask me for my autograph. I'm like, what? Should be the other way around, But that's just perspective, right? And I'm glad that I had that I guess that humbling experience that, people see us that way, because I want to honor that. Because the people that went before me, they're the ones that earned it. So I'm just trying to uphold that standard.
Yeah.
Not to sound too cheesy or anything, but
that's
that's
weight.
a reality.
It's the weight of the job.
For sure.
I mean, and every job has it that you have pride in. I mean, was divers, like the SEAL community. I mean, what was told to me when I got out, I talked to one of my buddies, was like, you're not a SEAL anymore, but you are. You always will be. That weight is always going to be on your shoulders.
For sure.
To uphold that standard. Whether you like it or not, you are speaking for the SEAL community, even though you feel like you're not. So you'll always have that weight on you. But I think that's a good thing, though, because it sort of keeps you in line as well. Doesn't let you sway off into becoming a lazy turd and join civilian life. So I mean, any job that takes a lot of grit and determination to get is always going to be with you for the rest of your time, which is, it's awesome.
I agree.
Yeah. So you guys are, so obviously you're at Navy dive school right now, right? As both instructors. Well, you're both at the same spot.
I'm right across the bay.
You're across the bay.
To the other side. I was there for 3.5 years.
Yep. Okay. So when we were connected, obviously I spoke to Dan. He really just gave me a baseline, connected with Lindsay, and she told me sort of what you guys are doing. And I'm going to try to I'll give you a brief synopsis, but then I want you guys to really get into detail on what you're doing, why you're here, and why it's important. But basically the BAH, right, for the housing allowance, it's a basic housing allowance that everybody in the military gets, right? Everybody gets it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All branches.
Yeah. Was cut down to 95% back in 2000.
Yeah, so 2019, BH was designed to cover 95% of your housing and utilities. So I got the opportunity to kind of step away from the training aspect when I was at the dive school, and I started training the guys that were on hold or hurt themselves and were getting in the recovery, right? So it gave me a little more time. But since I moved here in 2020, post-COVID, which is always interesting times, right? I noticed a trend, and I heard the service members talking, the men and women I worked with, about the housing and the pay and how they were struggling daily. And we kind of took our route over 2 years, was like 2021 and 2022, doing command surveys that we had at our disposal as service members, and like no actionable results came from them. And
So what? But you guys were in charge, right? Of like what was your collateral duty that got you involved into doing this?
so, as service members, and I'm sure you remember, we have our primary jobs,
Yep.
and then we have our collateral duties, which are the 20 other things you're responsible for, right? So my primary collateral was a command financial specialist, which essentially was just it's a 5-day course, super beneficial course to be a part of for your own benefit. But the course is designed to help service members that were in financial hardship, or to help them budget, or
It's like a Dave Ramsey for
kind of. Except, I'm not telling people don't use credit cards, but yeah, it's a super awesome course. And I was also, like, I've always been one to pursue and, try to make money and save money as well. Right. So over the course of those 3.5 years, I sat down with, hundreds of service members that, were my friends, my team. Right. And I kept hearing the same story over and over about the hardships they were dealing with in terms of pay. And
What were some of the examples that you were hearing?
so I would say 60 to 70% of it was housing related. The housing allowance for this area just wasn't covering the bills, right? And it was pay related in general for the most of them, but childcare related. Childcare was hard to find. Especially after COVID. It still is now. Like me personally, I was on a waiting list for almost a year just to get a spot into childcare. So, for me personally, as I hear these stories, when I went through that, had to make a choice like, I'm expected to be at work at 6 o'clock, but I don't have childcare. I mean, I only have 40 days I can take off in a year. How do I do that? So we had to rely on family members to help in that case, but childcare related, cost of food related, and housing related were the biggest. Pay in general,
Yeah.
was the biggest things that were coming to me, and they weren't all clear from wrongdoing. Some of them have bad spending habits, but I would say the good majority of them did everything right, and that's where in 2023 I kind of started really looking into like how this process worked in terms of housing pay. How did they determine the housing pay for each area? Every area is different, right? California may get 4,000. Him and I both get roughly 2,300.
2,300 for this area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Can you imagine trying to survive off that?
So
Dude.
that's for the basic housing allowance. Him and I both get. I want to say the exact number is like 2,358. So one of the things I learned in 2023 is I initially thought it included home buyers, but the whole process works off rental data, right? So there's about a 6-month period of time. It opens in March and it ends in August, where the housing offices collect data, meaning rentals. So each month they get as many rentals as they can, and they divide them up in 6 categories, like a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, single-family home, for example. And that data they collect drives whether we get an increase or decrease each year.
Well, did they do it for this area during March through August for that?
So-
Because it would be astronomical.
And that's where I think he's going to get to is that, we started seeing some of these deficiencies along the way.
Yeah, 2021, things were keeping up, and then 2022, it really fell off. And, I felt it. I'm sure he felt it, and many of the people I sat down with on a daily basis, that was their main thing that they were struggling with. And as I read, I read every manual that is applicable to this. I read U.S. code and all the guidances just to educate myself, because as we know, like, you don't want to come in half-cocked when you're trying to execute a task or a mission, right? So I educated myself, got up to speed on the process, and essentially what I found out was this area just hadn't done the best they could, to put it politely. They hadn't collected sufficient data for the beach. For example, like, you should collect roughly 300 to 380 rentals throughout that 5 months. We work with Tyndall, which is the Air Force base that's about 20 miles away from the Navy base. But our installation, collected 23 last year, for example. So in a 5-month period of time, they collected 23 rentals, which, from what I see, ultimately led to our BAH not being sufficient for the area, right? And him and I both had the privilege to go to a training. We got appointed as members that can participate. Typically, it's only for the civilians that are in the housing offices. But we got to go to a training in North Carolina, 3-day training, to help with this process. And, what we found out, or what we saw in that training, is I think there was 38 civilians in that training, and the concerning part was the level of knowledge in that room. Like, I educated myself for a couple months. You did as well. And the questions the people were asking, like, it's good to ask questions, obviously.
Yeah.
But that forum there was expected to be, okay, you've already been doing this, you're proficient.
These are supposed to be the subject matter experts.
Yes.
This is the refresher.
Yeah.
To get you back up to speed for this cycle, right? But, the questions they were asking, the level of knowledge, and what I thought about it was, these are literally the people across the United States that are controlling our pay. And it's concerning, right? And, I compared Eglin and Holbert Field, which is about 50 miles away from where we are on the Navy base. And one of the interesting things I found when I compared 2023 housing data was the junior service members in Eglin, for example, get 32% more than the junior service members in Panama City. And I mean, it's a massive amount. So to put it in perspective, an E1, which is your day one, brand new to the Navy, gets the same thing as a senior chief, which probably has 15 to 20 years of service in. Mm-hmm. So an E1 in Eglin gets the same thing as a senior chief would in Panama City,
which is insane.
And I'm and then I go through the process, or the thought process, of how did we get here? Well, how does the process work? It works by collecting data. If the data wasn't collected sufficiently, that's how we got here, right? So him and I's Chief Boyer, Brett Boyer's, and myself's path, after learning all this and plugging in and being a part of the program or inputting the data, is how can we fix it? How can we right wrongs that were, over 2 to 3 years? In a civilian world, you'd probably be entitled to back pay if something like that was overlooked, right?
In a civilian world.
In the military, that's pretty far-fetched. That would be great, because while all this is happening, the men and women that continue to serve, who are giving their all daily, are going broke daily.
Yeah, or going into debt.
Are going broke, going into debt daily. And
why do you think, where do you think this was, like, why do you think this was overlooked? And, like, obviously this is 3 years that you guys found this.
Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of a, I don't want to oversimplify anything, but if I had to put my finger on it, again, when something affects you, right? If it affects you, then you usually try to put more effort into it. Now, what happens is that in our housing offices, what they put out doesn't necessarily affect their paychecks. It doesn't affect what they do on a daily basis. So, again, I think the fact that it doesn't affect them had everything to do with it. Now, the accountability piece of it is, we had to literally go to the congressman's office. So you talked about Nicole Smith. She's the she's the deputy chief for Congressman Dr. Dunn over in Florida. So he's in the the federal Congress, right? So she had to get our leadership in order to get us on to this third-party site that we could see all the stuff and data that they were putting in. And when we saw it, we had about 25% of them were found in low-income and high-crime areas, which you're supposed to not even be able to pick from, but they did. And so you're getting stuff that, you know.
Do you think that's done on purpose?
I don't honestly think it was done maliciously. I think it's done carelessly.
Yeah.
Just because, like I said, it's not something they necessarily have to serve under. So they're just there, you know, doing their jobs, putting in their, you know, time, putting in some numbers, and then moving on, not necessarily seeing what it does to the service member. Meanwhile, as chiefs of our teams, we're having people come with complications of childcare, of housing costs, of all these things, base housing, all of these things are coming to us, and we're trying to filter it up.
Yeah.
Unsuccessfully.
The reason I ask, you know, if it possibly be done on purpose, or obviously you said carelessly, is a lot of these civilian jobs, you know, these people that work for the military and do these types of tasks, especially with the housing, they get, I wouldn't say like promoted, or it just looks better on them if they are saving the Navy money, right? I mean, and so that's why I ask if someone could be like, well, we'll just do this testing of the lowest income area here, and that way we'll make the BAH for that.
I don't think it comes. I think it's more so blissfully unaware, maybe. You know,
okay.
It's you get told. I found myself more up to speed than the two individuals that were in that housing office, right? So as part of my due diligence, I went into that office and I just started asking questions, right? And, you know, they're like, wow, we're concerned with or we're amazed at how much you know. And I was like, well, I've only read like 20 pages of this
BH primer.
Concerning, right? But when the main person came in that ran that housing office, she's like, what are you doing here? And I said, oh, I'm just trying to educate myself. Like our service members, the men and women I work with, are struggling, and I want to try to get this fixed however I can. I want to help, right? And she's like, you're better off reaching out to your congressman if you want that fixed. You know, that was the joke she made. And it's funny now because, you know, that's what it took to actually get things moving.
Some movement.
Which is kind of sad at the same time, right? We couldn't fix this internally. But yeah, it's there's a lot of intricacies that work within this program. The other thing too is MHPI, which is Military Housing Privatization Initiative Partner. Hopefully I said that right, but each base.
Those acronyms just keep getting better and better.
Don't ask me how to spell it. But each base has this other third-party entity that they can use or they don't have to use, right? So we as enlisted or the primary housing office, we can't pick areas in high crime areas. We can't pick rentals that are in subsidized areas, right? We can't pick trailers. We can't pick Airbnbs. MHPI, which what I found is our base heavily relied on. They do the work for you, right? They literally do the work for you. We relied heavily on that entity. When I say we, I'm meaning the base, right? Not me personally. So since they did rely on that third-party entity heavily, it brought our overall quality down, like our quality of rentals or our data we submitted. So, you know, you asked the question, do you think it was done on purpose? I think MHPI does have their agenda would probably be the word, right? Mm-hmm. Why would we have to adhere to a certain standard, and then we have the base has an option? Hey, here's this other option. They don't have any standards. They can do whatever they want. You know, and I'm not going to speak for anybody and what they do or don't want to do, but you know, if I was a civilian and I said, what do you mean they'll do the work for me, and I don't have to do anything? That seems like a pretty good option, right? So when I looked at what was collected in 2022 and 2023, what him and I both saw was heavy use of that MHPI data.
And to put a number on it, it was about 45% use of that said program. So it's not something that was insignificant. It was almost about half.
Yeah.
Well, so how are they paid? Because I'm with you, Eddie. I'm like, where there's money, there's
That's I mean, but that's
but
also
if they're paid for, hey, we have a budget, and whatever your data comes back with, outside that budget, you get the rest.
And to be honest with you, I don't know if you can answer that. They're paid to, I guess, collect this data. Now, this goes up to the offices of the Secretary of Defense, right? So, but in that office, that's where you're going to get what is that N1 that heavily involved, which is it's just a code for administrative. This is what's going to happen. It's an N code, which is a kind of a department of the Navy.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what they do is that they take the data that they have, and then they'll kind of extrapolate, from there what is going to actually go out in your paycheck, right? And so maybe on that level, but I don't know exactly how they could manipulate or not manipulate data. I just know that the data that we did have that was sent up was weak at best.
Yeah. And here's the thing, Dave, and obviously my mind always goes to somebody's doing something to scam or make some more money, but that also couldn't be the issue either, because you can.
Well, they did have. Well, just to speak to your point, they did have that where Senator Rubio was actually on a headhunt for. I can't remember what the name of the organization that was running base housing, but he was suing them.
Yeah.
This is a huge lawsuit. That's pretty widely known in the military. I don't know if it.
Was it Belfort, Beatty?
Yeah, Belfort and Beatty. Right, so Belfort Beatty, and I can't remember what the lawsuit. We're talking about multi-millions that they were suing, because what was happening is that they were taking government money and not necessarily keeping that housing up, but then requiring more money from the service members from their BAH. So the way that works with government housing is that they're going to charge this. It's government housing, right, and it's run by a third party. In this case, it was Belfort Beatty. They say it's going to be, let's just say, $2,300. Cool. Well, I have $95 left over. Fine. But what they did is they said, we're going to charge all of this, but then when you have problems and updates and all that kind of stuff, and maintenance, we're not doing that.
Ooh.
So if you Google it, there have been cases of that entity not doing what they were supposed to. There was one in Groton, Connecticut I looked into. I think it was 2019. And another good example of what he's talking about is, Tyndall got the largest military grant ever approved in history, right, following Hurricane Michael through Congressman Dunn's office. Our base we're assigned to, which is NSA Panama City, we didn't get any sort of grant or funding for anything, right? So our child care centers got removed. They were gone. Our piers got damaged. Our barracks got knocked down or was condemned.
Yeah, condemned, yeah.
And we didn't get any funding to repair a lot of these things, as well as our base houses were built in, I want to say 1960, 1964.
The base housing? 1958.
1958, right? So what he's talking about, they have the option to do full BAH, meaning if I'm at E6, right, I've been in for 12 years, and I do have the option to live on base, you can. You don't have to pay any utilities, but we're taking your full amount of BAH.
That's what I did my whole career. I lived in military housing in San Diego in Point Loma.
And it's a good option.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They take away all my BAH. So I don't get any housing allowance because I live in that military housing installation. But what came with that is, which I liked it, if something went wrong with the house, or because we're gone and deployed all the time, my wife wouldn't have to worry. There's a person that'll come that day and fix whatever. It worked out well. But the thing I did notice though, and I wonder, I got out in 2019. That military housing I lived in was amazing. I grew up an Army brat. I lived in military housing my whole pretty much childhood. And I've lived in some of the shittiest and, places, especially with the Army. They seem to not give two shits about their people sometimes. But when I moved into the military housing in San Diego, it was like creme de la creme. Like I was like, dude, I've never seen military
Well,
housing
it was
like this.
brand new, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when I went back in 2021 to visit some buddies in San Diego, and I just was like, oh, I'll go take a tour of the old neighborhood. It was trashed. Like I'm talking just dilapidated. It didn't look anything like when I lived there. And then I just recently went back, I think it was this year, and just drove, and now it seemed to be building back up again. Like, so I'm wondering, if obviously COVID, all that stuff happened, if that had a huge impact on the money that was coming in to upkeep those houses and do all that. I mean, I don't know. Haven't looked into it, but just hearing you guys talk about this.
I think it's so the way those I looked into it for a little bit, and it's a contract, right? They get awarded a contract. Let's say the contract's 25 years, which I think him and I are talking about is 25-year contract. They're like 12 years in, for example. Tyndall has brand new homes now. They're charging full BH, perfect, no problems. Our base, for example, has homes that were built in
58.
Whoa.
1958, and you're going to have issues that come along with 70 to 80-year home, right? But my thought process of what great, as a landlord, if I was a landlord, right, how awesome would it be to have an 80-year-old home and be able to charge $2,700? Talk about return on investment. So they're getting top dollar for these homes that are 1,100 square feet. Don't quote me on that number, but very small, very old, yet we're being charged a premium.
I had a Coast Guard member that while we were actually giving a tour to Congressman Dunn, his whole house was flooded. And if he didn't say, and the housing office said, hey, we'll get out there tomorrow. Well, my house is flooded, and I'm talking about 2 inches all across this place. And he had, he has a family. If Congressman Dunn hadn't been on, if he hadn't have been on the base at that time, which he ended up using that to get a gun on him, they would maybe it was tomorrow, maybe it was the next day. But could you imagine having an inch to 2 inches all across your floor? And this is what they're paying top. Maybe $2,300 for every month.
That's insane.
And I think it's actually smaller than 1,100 square feet. I want to say it's like 800 square feet. So.
And these are people with, they have a wife, possibly 2 kids.
2 kids, yeah.
Yeah. And these, I think, and that's the major issue here of why you guys are doing this, because you see that the men and women that are joining and get stationed here are suffering and when I say suffering, I'm not like, that's maybe an extreme word, but their families it's a hardship just to even do the job.
Well, yeah, and like I said, they're bigger picture wise too, is that you're looking around the world and people, like I said, we're human beings. We like to compare, we like to contrast. But when you have people that are putting in and serving America and doing what's right, and they've done it for years, then you have situations like immigration where they're being put into better living situations than you could possibly even imagine, and then given money on top of that when the service to the country hasn't existed. They just crossed the border, which again, I don't mean to get into that.
No, but it's a good compare.
But
either way.
But that's just where the human mind goes. And so when you have them living in 5-star hotels and you're living in, kind of, I'd say substandard at this point.
You can't get your kids taken care of to do your job.
And they can't even go out and play because of the yard maintenance that they have there, and the type of trees, and how those sand spurs are and everything.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. So it's just not a very,
conducive environment to
living
live in or work out of, pretty much.
I get it. I get it. It's a service. You're supposed to do stuff that are,
Yeah,
but the family's not.
That's true.
You as the individual, and this is the issue is us as a service member when we're in, we're fine. We're like, all right, I'm made to suffer. I can get through this. And that's if I was living in that house alone. Great, put me in the shittiest spot. I'll make it work. But when I have a wife and kids, who they didn't sign up to do that, they signed up. They're supporting you as a service member, and that's about it. But they should not have to be subjected to the same half-assed treatment that we're used to getting in the military. You know what I mean? Like, we're used to sort of getting shit on and being like,
I think
okay,
that's also
cool.
part of the problem too. Is like we maybe not just the special operations community, but we're brought up to accept the suck, right?
Yes, embrace it.
It's just how it is. Deal with it. Push mental resilience, right? That's how we're bred and trained from early on. But if you take that away, right, what you're talking about, your family didn't sign up for
No.
that. Your wife, your kids, your whoever, right? And this area, what we didn't really talk about yet is this area is also very unique. Like, I think this is a wide scale issue that's impacting many bases, but it's also unique in a sense of we had a major hurricane come through here, Hurricane Michael, and it destroyed this whole area. And we're still rebuilding. Tyndall's still not complete. It's been, since 2019, they've been rebuilding that whole base. So I mentioned the childcare thing. The quick fix to that was 2 trailers, 2 single wide trailers, right, for a childcare facility for that whole base. I'm thankful it's there, right? It was my only thing I got into after being on 8 different waiting lists for a year. But that temporary fix became the permanent fix for this area, as well as, how am I paying $900 for a childcare facility in a trailer when, the next state over, or in Eglin, for example, they have a whole brick and mortar structure.
Yeah,
It's
they have
the
a
same
facility.
exact price.
Yeah.
And why haven't we done what we needed to do as a base or a Navy entity that serves in Panama City to fix them? It's been 5 years. How long does it take? I mean, I can go build a house in 6 months. How long does it take to build a 20 by 40 childcare center?
So while you guys are, obviously delving into this over the past couple of years and trying to find a solution to this problem, what are some of the things that you guys have found on like why you think this is happening? And I know you guys had filed up the chain of command like properly on, hey, this is what we see, this is what we found, and here's a solution. Did you guys get pushback? Did you guys get like, okay, we're going to fix this problem?
Yeah, I think he kind of started off with talking to certain brass that I think they were definitely interested in it, but I think that's the whole thing with pay in the military. And for instance, is that it goes up far beyond where we're at, and then they go and talk about it at Ways and Means committees, and it kind of gets lost in the sauce about what we're telling them on the ground to what they're actually getting, which is the reason why working with Congressman Dunn's office has been beneficial. But I just don't think that because they're not living it, they're not in it. They can only take
Out of sight, out of mind.
and that's right. And so that's what I'm talking about. Is this is an indictment on the processes, just like most of the things that we have. And I understand that processes are not always going to be, perfect.
Yeah.
Right. Especially when you have a 40% or a 40-time all high when it comes to inflation. Right. When we were told, what was it, topped out at 9% when. Sure. If you add in housing, that's about 22-23%.
Around here, more than doubled right around 2020, 2021.
Yeah, right. And so now we're still, floating around, 3.5%, but that's month over month. That's still an inflation that's unsustainable, especially when it comes to military pay. I know that there was a 2021 where they did what was a 12% bump, but when you're looking at areas that, like in our area, my house that I live in right now was bought for $205,000. I bought it for $475,000. We're talking about not even 20 years, and it almost doubled, or it did double.
More.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're talking about. And you and I know, being in this area, that $2,400 is chump change. Especially when you go look at some of the data now. With all honesty. Some of the houses are starting to come down in certain areas of Florida, but not in Panhandle. Panhandle is just
No, it's growing.
It's just continue to grow 10% to 15% a year, and we went to the Chamber of Commerce, and that's one of the statistics that they put up. And so again, when we're talking about why is this unique here, well, it's unique in several different areas, and there's some places that are lowering, down, like say, it's like some of the hot spots, like in New York. Well, they're starting to move down here. They're starting to move from to Tennessee. They're starting to do all these things. But again, when you don't have housing, and we're competing for that housing with civilians, right? So our anchor point for, let's just say, an E6 or E7 is a 3-bedroom townhome. How many 3-bedroom townhomes do you think they have in this type of housing population in the Panhandle? Is that very common? It's not very common at all. And so Tom Neubauer, you may or may not know the name. He's a huge name as far as developers and things. And we've actually had the privilege to talk to him. But that's what he was talking about. He goes, this anchor point won't work here because you have, it's less than 1% of what it represents in our housing market. But yet that's what they're asking you guys to do. So then you look at that. Well, then guess what? There's only 2 available at this point. Well, great. We have 50 people moving in. So that service member now has a choice of picking something that's out of their budget or going underneath their budget. Because
And there's not much even underneath around here.
there really isn't.
A lot of the high rises they've been putting up recently.
And those are all considered luxury, right? So a lot of that stuff is not made for us. It's made for the big money that's coming down here.
There's a difference between yes, processes aren't perfect, but there's a difference between not perfect than absolutely broken, and you can't get it through. And
what he's talking about here is the process that the DoD across the board has, it can work, right? And I think it did work well, probably 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and when he's talking about anchor points, that's the 6 categories I said, how they break into housing profile. Like as a chief with a family, I'm sure you would have never guessed you were expected to live in a townhome.
No.
Or could you find a townhome?
No, I mean, no, not at all. Even in California.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why it was like I never had any intention of moving out of military housing because I was like, there's no way, even on chief or senior chief's pay, that you're going to be able to sustain that for that long, or live there. Because and that's what I found out with a lot of my friends that did, because there was always a pressure to go buy a house, now's the time and do this and that. And I always just had this weird, I'm like, no, I don't think so. But the guys that did go buy houses and then they end up getting out, they're stuck, because they haven't paid off that house and they can barely afford it. So now they're doing a rat race of trying to find a job that can actually keep them in that house. And I just knew, I was like, I didn't want to be stuck in that position. But it's unfortunate that that's happening down here. I mean, and I don't know obviously the solution is to get the BAH back to, but even at 100%, they need to raise it, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the 100% definitely helps, right? But it is a cumulative type situation here where you're dealing with house childcare that's astronomical.
Yeah.
You're looking at if you did want to purchase a house, and again, your whole life you're told, hey, if you build your housing and all that kind of stuff, that's how you build wealth. Well, I mean, for the service member, it's almost like, hey, don't do that. You're out of the market. We expect you to rent. This is the process that we have. And maybe that's not the message, but that's basically, that's what
it's naturally the message, because as a service member, you're expected to move every 2 years or 3 years. We are going to place you somewhere else in the country or maybe somewhere else across the world. So yeah, there's no incentive to buy a house. I mean, and people do it.
I mean, he owned a couple. I have, and actually it worked out well for me with during that price hike, because I bought something that was significantly lower, and then dang near doubled my return on it, which again, that was one of the benefits of owning a home, right? Because you're hedging yourself against inflation. And so when you do have something like inflation come along, well, you have this asset that you can help protect.
Yeah, and your rent's paying into.
Yeah. And your rent is paying into it, so it's something that you can leverage. You can leverage that debt. You can do all kinds of stuff with it, but not the service member. And people that are coming in, they're a lot smarter than now, it seems. Because, I mean, heck, the internet's at their fingertips, right? They can look up anything, anytime, any place, anywhere. So they know these things, they hear these stories. And so that's the reason why we're having a huge problem trying to get people in when we are recruiting them, is they're like, well, what's in it for me? I can't buy a house. You're going to move me, away from my family. Now I'm going to, you're talking about Iran. You talk about Russia. You talk about China. You're talking about real situations that could be very explosive in nature. And then you want to start a family. Well, then what if you're taken out in that scenario? You're gone. Now you have even $500,000 is like chump change, because again, now you leave your wife, kids with nothing. Essentially, you might, I'm talking about the death benefits of 500,000 is what it is now. You could take out home. Well, in taxes, I pay $5,000 a year, and then I have $5,000 worth of insurance that you still have to continue to pay for. That's 10 grand. All these things start to add up. Childcare, is she going to work? Is she not going to work?
Yeah.
Because you're no longer there. You're gone, and that's a reality. And so kids are looking at this, or not so much kids, 18 to 25 years old, and they're making the choice not to.
Yeah. Well, do you think the process that they have now, if they were doing it right, like they didn't take the lower income housing and like 28 instead of 350 that they should have done, do you think if they did it right around this area and did a real valuation, then that would fix it?
So there's a couple of things that I think tie into this, right? So prior to me moving here in 2020, 56 housing areas, it's MHAs, got immediate pay bumps. So Congress passed legislation that said, hey, these areas are not funded sufficiently. Boom, immediate pay bumps, right? In 2022, 28 more installations got immediate pay bumps. And that was following the current Secretary of Defense's, it was titled Memorandum to Senior Pentagon Leadership.
Can you tell them about how they even get that? So some of the things we did as we worked this, right, we did our due diligence in finding out how it works. We figured out what was submitted. How did we get here? That's step one, right? How did we get to this situation? I had a phone call with one of the guys in Eglin. He was a retired senior chief, had been doing the housing gig for a couple years, and he was very good at it. And he's like, look, you need to fill the system with quality data as quickly as possible, or they'll fill it for you, is essentially what he said, right? And he, when I looked at the comparison I did, I have a comparison that shows in 2023, what Eglin and Holbert Field service members got, E1 through 06, compared to what, Panama City Tyndall service members got. And what I saw when I looked at that comparison is there's the 34% difference in the junior ranks. That's the difference in pay. I'm like, well, how could we possibly get to a 34% difference in basic allowance? It was mind-blowing, right? And what it came down to was just the housing office's ability to do their job. Right? What did they submit, or what did they not submit? And, that's what's, I assume, is taking place across the nation. And that's why the 56 installations probably got pay bumps in 2019, and in 2022, the 28 got pay bumps. But
because those did their job?
They determined when they looked at data, like, hey, we need to catch these areas up, right? And I'll tie it all together here in a second. So, when we figured out what the problem was, this is the problem, this is how we fix it for next year. Well, it's like, well, how do we fix it now? This has been done wrong from what I see for 2 to 3 years now. How do we fix it now, not 365 days from now? Because every day, like he was just talking about, all these things that add up, whether it be the child care, the cost of food, the cost of living, utilities, that is a day when you're telling the service member, hey, go out, give your all. We need your 100% focus. We need you mentally sound and stable, because if you don't, or if you're not, the ultimate sacrifice is someone could die from it, right? If you're not 100% in the game at all times when you're at your work, like for him and I, it was training students, high-risk evolutions, right? The worst-case scenario is someone could die from it, right?
Yeah.
And there was so much hardship taking place and so much extra burden on the service members, it was a problem, a daily problem. So the path forward, once we figured out that what the problem was and how we got there, was it's a site survey. And all it is essentially you fill out a request. There's one signature on it, and members from OSD, which is the Office of Secretary of Defense, they come down and they look at the area. And that's what we're currently in the process of awaiting to hear if we were granted that. We filed for it, or the area filed for it in May. So we still haven't heard whether that will pan out or not, but that is the fix to catch up, basically, right? The other fix is an immediate increase, which is what happened in 2022 following that memorandum. And when I looked at how that memorandum, or when I looked at what that memorandum said, right, it was all fantastic words. It said, these are my priorities and initiatives. It was take care of the warfighter. What does that mean? We want to fund the commissaries, which is where you shop and get your food, obviously. We want to increase funding for child care facilities, and we want to increase the way we do basic housing allowance and better fund those programs, right? So it was the Secretary of Defense saying, these are my goals and my task, and then these 28 areas got immediate pay bumps. And when I looked at those areas, 5 of them surrounded us. Kings Bay, there's a couple in Florida, and some of them got upwards of 40%. But what I saw is, like, why were we not on that list? After I've looked at 3 years of data while doing my normal job, how did we not make this list? Because we're dying out here, right? And I think it was just no one was aware that there was a problem. How were people unaware? Disconnected.
Incompetence.
Disconnected
That's
from the situation.
Really, and that's, I think I was gonna, when we talked about earlier, Dave, when I was like, we went, like, somebody's doing something shady, but it also, you could never underestimate the level of incompetence that goes on within the government. Like, as far as the civilian entities that sort of work with DOD, there is a lot of, it's like DMV work. You know what I mean? Like, they don't have like a buy-in. They're just there collecting a paycheck. So therefore, the level of work that is getting done is slim to none, which is why, you guys came in, you said you read like 20 pages and you knew more than they did, right? That's a perfect example right there. You have somebody with buy-in that came in like, no, I care about this and I care about the sailors underneath me, so therefore I want to find out what the problem is, and you delved into it, and then you go talk to the supposed subject matter experts, and they're like, they don't know, and they don't care.
Call your congressman.
You know what I mean? Yeah, call your congressman. Like, don't put that on me. It's like, well, that is your job.
Yep.
That is what you exist for. Like, and I think, that's a common thread on it, unfortunately.
Yeah, and you kind of hit it on the head, right? And so the accountability piece as well. So number one, there is no accountability as far as to the service member. So these programs are meant to help the service member, but you can't see the data unless you go ask a Congress member, to get this and special access. Then on top of that, the stuff that affect you can't change. So you don't even know. You're out there worried about, hey, how is this guy going to decompress, to where he doesn't get, some sort of decompression sickness. But meanwhile, you're thinking, well, you know what? I wonder how we fix this, BAH issue. Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Or take it a step back. I wonder how I'm going to pay my power bill.
Yeah. And
my child
and
care
we're
fees.
lucky because we have extra pays. Now I get demo pay, I get diving pay, I get assignment pay, right? Some of the guys that we work there with, they don't have this. They don't have this $600 to $800 extra incentive. And let's just, if I don't know if what your power bills were lately, but you're getting the height of summer $300-400 for a 2,000 square foot home is nothing.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy to accomplish, so how they're getting this data for, getting the utilities right. Heck, it's $150 for me, for water and sewer, $150. You can just count on it, not to mention gas or the other things that we have that are installed in our homes, it's quite costly. You're looking anywhere on, height of summer, July time frame. I'd say it wouldn't be hard to spend $700 on utilities. And then we get it back and you're like, where did they get these utility numbers? Where are they getting this? And so we did when we sent out the survey request to the Secretary of Defense office in one, we collected it from 1,200? Something like that. 1,200 service members, both in Tyndall and PCB NAS. And I mean, they're all 500 plus.
Yeah.
And then we get back the other stuff, and it's collectively, you're like, wait a minute, $330 is what you got? When was this, and who was this? Because it didn't represent anybody that we sent up. So it's been an eye-opening time.
What's been the
see.
response?
It's been, well, it depends on who asks, right? So, I mean, if it's just two chiefs, we definitely had our chain of command have been pretty supportive at the schoolhouse, but other chain of commands not so much, right? And maybe they don't think that there actually is a problem, right? So there is that, and they're entitled to their opinion. That's their prerogative for sure. But when you send up this data and you're like, hey, look at this, and then they're like, well, they're fine. You have some. We had 58% out-of-pocket costs, which is something that's like kind of sets the law for what they're going to pay you. We had 58% of our people that were over that significantly. Okay, and that if all you need is 50% for on-site survey. We had 58%. Tyndall was under that, but that was also based off of the instructions that they maybe were giving their people as well, right? Hey, it covers, because when we got the data back from their side of the house, they cut out utilities. They didn't know that utilities was actually a part of BAH.
Yeah, that was from the top down. So real quick, you mentioned we talked about 95% and 100%. I don't think we actually broke down the true definition of basic housing allowance, which I didn't know until I started looking into this either. As service members, we're just like, well, our rent's paid, our mortgage is paid. But what I didn't know is BAH by design is supposed to cover your power, water, and gas, right? So by definition, BAH currently set at 95%. Is supposed to cover 95% of your housing costs plus power, water, gas, which was unknown to me. He's talking about the utility rate thing. How they get it, it's an unknown. It says when you look into it, it says
Magical number that they
It
know.
is,
They're like,
yeah.
man,
national means
we'll
average.
put it in the algorithm here.
Yeah.
National means average.
National means average, and that's why I think this area is very unique in terms of, for one, we've had Hurricane Michael, Michael, right? Mm-hmm. We've also had a huge power company buyout, right?
FPL.
FPL got bought out by.
No, FPL bought out, I believe, Duke and Gulf.
Yeah. So, you asked the question, how has the response been? I mean, it's been an uphill battle for over a year, right? And I'm not saying an uphill battle as if we haven't had wins, right? Each time we've made progress, it's like one step forward,
2
10
steps back. Yeah.
however many steps, but it has been forward progress, right? And then Congressman Dunn's office started aiding. Nicole Smith has been a huge asset and ally for all of the military assigned in this area, but it's been a slow-moving ball uphill, right?
And that was just to get the fix now,
Yeah,
right?
site survey now.
And so we're talking about a year of our time, a year. Not to mention the previous years. And here's another fun fact. So Eglin actually was receiving less money than we were since 2019 is when 2020 is when it switched. But remember, now an E1 makes more than as much as a senior chief does now. We went from making more than them to making less to an E1 to a senior chief. That's a significant switch, especially when we have people like Tom Neubauer who actually debrief some of the top military brass in our nation. because he is such a huge commercial developer. He has, I mean, his name is everywhere in Panama City. Basically agreeing with what our reality is. And that reality is, hey, the data that they're giving is bunk. You know, and that was his conclusion, and that's what he passed up. And he's been an ally in the game as well, as well with Congressman Dunn's office has been a godsend. And
Good.
you know, being in the military, you know, and what you I'm sure know, just probably intuitively, is that, you know, anything government takes time. And so to respond to something that we haven't seen in 40 years, we haven't seen inflation like this in 40 years. And then you have a system that just cannot respond at all. But then you're talking about 3 to 4 years of this stuff where it's bleeding that service member dry. And it's not only just on the housing end of it, but it is, hey, you want to go fill up your truck? Good luck. Go take out a loan. You know, you want to go to the grocery store? For a family of 4, I spend $600 easy for 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And then we get, you know, I mean, our BAS is, for us, it's a basic allowance for subsistence, right? Which is just food, right? For us, it's just the service member, not the family. But I mean, $400. I think it's $468 now, for the month. Would that sustain you?
No, especially if
me.
you have, yeah, just
me.
you as an individual. You'd probably have to change some
Yeah.
things, the way you do some things. You could make it happen.
You're definitely not
but
eating high on the hog, and
No.
then you throw in, you know, family.
That is ridiculous. Yeah.
It's just unsustainable. I mean, $1,200 at the minimum is what you're going to be going at and then you're basically budgeting for gas, and all this stuff is going up, and then you have housing to deal with, which is, again, we thought was going to be the easiest avenue to change, and it's not been the case.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have found out for sure how slow the government works, but then there's also in there, which I guarantee there's the finger pointing, right, which is also causes a block within the leadership, because somebody's going to see this and be like, how did this happen? And you know how it goes. It's like the next person down the rank. It's like, okay, dude, you were in charge of this. How did it get to this point?
For sure.
And then that person's going to point the finger at somebody else. No one's going to take accountability under their watch to be like, yes, this happened under my watch, and I'll take full responsibility. That is like, if you find an officer to come out and do that, you have found a gem.
Which sucks. It's just like, dude, who cares? It's my fault. Just make it happen.
You
for
would
the
think
service
it
member,
would be
you know?
that easy.
Like,
But here's the other thing: is if someone did come out and say, yes, this is my fault, like, their career is fucked.
Yeah.
They are going to take a hit on their eval, and especially the officers, the way that they are promoted. I mean, that's a career ender.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the other issue that you run into, unfortunately, is, you know, nobody wants to take accountability because everyone's looking out for number one, and that's themselves. I mean, like, well, I don't want to take this hit, and I think that is also part of the slow process, because while the government is determining, okay, how can we fix this problem, they're also determining who's going to be the fall guy for this.
For sure.
Right? And that is also
Somebody's
a huge
gotta be held
deliberation.
responsibility, and like, to serve to your point is that you're right. Who does care? I don't. I just want the problem fixed.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just want the service member.
But
Don't care.
unfortunately, we're in a military in a time where, you know, mistakes do end careers, and it shouldn't be that way, but it is.
Yeah, it's that whole zero tolerance policy thing, which
yeah.
I am completely in disagreement with.
Yeah, we're human beings. We're
yeah.
gonna make mistakes. We have oversights, and we all understand. We get it, because trust me. Do you think the guy that the guys that go through almost going through bankruptcy, or the guys that are, you know, on that side of the house really care if that's the point? Like, somebody's going to pay for this? No, we just want it finished.
Yeah. Is there any sort of silver bullets that, like, if a congressman or someone was like, oh, what? Like, okay, he could solve it in a day, or is there certain people that could, if they stepped in and...
There's always that.
The answer is Donald Trump.
Boom.
Yeah, funny joke, and we mentioned it to Eddie is as we were navigating some of this path, you know, again, Nicole Smith has been extremely helpful in this whole process, and I came to her one night, or I talked to her, I called her on the phone, and I was in a bad spot. Like, him and I have both been navigating this process, and while trying to do our normal jobs, and there's been a lot of lows. There's been some highs too, right? It hasn't been all bad. But she could tell I was super down, and, you know, I was frustrated at the process. I think we had a Teams meeting with like 26 people, all civilians, and we were like the only 2 active duty in it. And it's super frustrating. Like, I was ready to call it. But I also realized, like, if I dropped the ball and I stopped, it wasn't just dropping it for myself. It was for the 2,600 that serve in this area, right?
Yeah.
But I was like, she's like, what can I do? I was like, I would like to speak with Eddie Gallagher or Donald Trump, whichever one you can. And I was like, and she's like, why? I'm like, because I think they have the ability to make positive change, right? And I don't think anybody, or I haven't met many people that go into anything with a focus of ill will, like, I'm going to do the wrong thing today, right? And it's, you know, you said how did we get here, or silver bullets. Like, you know, I made this issue known in August of 2023. I briefed the top members of the base, right? But, you know, do you remember the Navy's core values?
Honor, courage, and commitment.
Yeah, and honor, courage, and commitment, right? And I would say integrity would be another one too, right? And, you know, what's y'all's definition of integrity?
Outsides matching insides. Like,
Doing the right thing when nobody's looking.
Yeah. So when I look at how we got here and the solution, or, you know, as him and I we're navigating this process, you know, once I briefed the top members, I did everything I could do within my given processes, right, as active duty, and then we just sat silent for weeks, for months, and I was losing sleep. I was losing sleep, a lot of sleep over it, and my mind was like continuously turning about, like, this is an issue that should have been fixed years ago. How do we keep going each day where guys and men and women are continuously digging themselves in a hole to serve this nation, right? And the only thing that comes to mind is integrity, which is the ability to do the right thing when no one's looking. You know, how would it be perceived if we or a base raise their hand and say, hey, we did this wrong, or we didn't do this as well as we could have? That's what comes to mind. But what I think is worse is not acknowledging the issue, letting it continue on.
Well, turning a blind eye.
You know, I'm not speaking for anybody, or these are just things that I think about, right? But more so, him and I have both tried to be the best part of how can we fix this problem. You know, in the military, we always have a saying like, don't bring a bitch or complaint without a solution.
Yep.
And there are solutions. It tells you how to work these problems, right? And it's why it's taken so long to get to a solution is beyond me. And we still don't even know if the solution is going to work or if it's been approved. But that's the path, right? And, you know, we've talked about some of these things like recruitment and retention, and we talked about the Secretary of Defense. Like, you know, there's these memorandums that these top brass people are putting out, the CNO, the SecDef, and they're all focused on the warfighter, right? Like, there's many things going on abroad, and they're talking about the warfighter and supporting the warfighter on the home front, and they say how they want to do it, right? And it's, how can we be saying these things at the top level, but we be so further from the truth on the ground level? And that's what confuses me, is because, and it frustrates me, it saddens me, it keeps me up at night. You know, my brain continuously turns, and I can't turn it off because I am here. I am talking to them. They do come to me with these stories. And, you know, he mentioned bankruptcy. Like, that's not a joke. You know, I sat down with a highly professional military member who did everything right and was considering filing bankruptcy. And how he got there was he decided to serve. He said, I want to serve my nation, and this is where he's at now, is he's borderline bankruptcy. You know, he didn't end up going through that, thankfully, and we got him out of that. But that's the thing.
The fact that it was on the table.
Yeah, and you know, we look at like some of the hot topic things right now, which are recruitment and retention. You know, we have all these, you know, wars taking place across the United States, and we have billions of dollars being given to immigrants or sent overseas. That's fine, but how are we not taking care of the people that you're telling to go over there? Or how are we not taking care of them the best we can, right? How do we have people coming to us saying, hey, I'm hurting, my family's hurting, what do I need to do? And your answer is, you're doing everything right. You know, so I think we really need, as a whole, if we want to fix recruitment and retention, easy fix, right?
Yeah,
Let's look inward and pay the men and women that decide to serve their nation the basics. Basic housing allowance, it's the basics. And we've gotten, I think we've fallen behind on that since COVID or inflation, since it's taking off. And now it's catching up with us in terms of if you're a smart person, or if your intent is to not serve just because you want to serve the nation, then you would get out, right? Like we spoke briefly like on our why. And I think it's important as leaders or military members to always have your why. And Eddie, I asked you, what was your why?
Yeah, I mean, for why I joined.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a lot like you. I'm generational. Like pretty much every male has served. I grew up in the military. It's just part of our tradition. But I also knew growing up in the military, because I lived overseas most of my childhood, different places. I knew this was the best country in the world, like without a doubt. Every time I came back after, being in China, Korea, wherever for 2 years, coming back here was like the ultimate feeling. I mean, it's like coming back from a deployment. You know what I mean? You're like, yes, I'm home. And so I just knew, I was like, there's nothing more honorable than signing up to serve this country, to defend it, to sacrifice for this country. And I traditionally, I like the military traditions. I like the culture. I liked living in it, everything about it. But also I was inspired. That is, and I think that is one thing that is missing. And I've said it before, is like inspirational leaders is what we're missing, which is, these kids nowadays, they look up, the military now. And I mean, there's a lot of factors, I mean, I know you guys are in the whole woke culture that's sort of like shoved down people's throats in the military. And I don't think, I mean, it's not as extreme as I think the outside people think. Like, oh, the military's gone woke, but it is part of it. I mean, that agenda is being pushed down. The fact that we have catered to the 1%, right? The weak is the way I look at it. And it's like we need to, cater to these individuals, and everybody else has to walk on eggshells now because we're trying to recruit this 1%. Well, if you focus all your time on the 1%, you're going to lose the other 99. There's going to be people like, I don't want to do this. This is not what I signed up for. There's nothing inspirational about this. So I think that's a big factor of why it's hard to get these young men and women to join. And then, like, also what you brought up earlier is they have all the information at their fingertips. You can't lie to these kids anymore. You can't, like these, the old recruiters being able to pull one over on us back in the day. If these kids are savvy enough, they can sit there and get everything they need on their phone and be like, no, that's not true. What you're telling me is not true. Like, what about this?
They
And
have these service members that would get on YouTube and tell you their whole experience, of
yeah.
recruitment.
Oh, I know. I mean, my son just joined the Marines. He joined last December, and before sending him off, I took him to the recruiter before he went to boot camp, and they literally played for him a POV video of like, this is what is going to happen to you, like from start to finish at boot camp, which I was sort of like, that sort of takes away like the experience of it. You're supposed to be going into the unknown. That's sort of like what helps build your character. But I think we've gotten to a point in the military where everything's like softer, and they're like, well, how can we make this more, a little bit easier on the individual coming in? And I'm like, that's not what the military is designed for. It's designed to take you from scratch and build you up into what the military wants and needs, and then send you on your way to whatever unit you're going to. But to sit there and sort of guide people through with, give me your hand, and this is what's going to happen next. Just be prepared for it. And if you aren't feeling safe, let somebody know. It's like, well, what kind of individual are we developing here?
Yep.
You know what I mean? That's just some of the. There's all the other factors, and this one right here, what you guys are talking about, I think this one is huge, obviously, because it's like, well, why would men and women want to sign up? They're like, if my basic needs aren't going to be met, like my basic family needs aren't going to be met, why would I put myself in that position? Not only to sacrifice my time away from my family, and let's just face it, you're sacrificing your body depending on what job you take. That's just comes along with it. And, when I joined, I knew that. I knew all that. I was like, I am going to sacrifice whatever it takes because I know at the end of the day, I'm going to be taken care of. The military will take care of me. They'll take care of my family. And I had that belief, but now
The support
yes,
was there.
the support is there. But yeah, this right here it's insane to me that not only is it happening, but it's being ignored.
The support piece is big, and when I ask the students the same thing when I was the instructors is, what's your why? And I think it's important whether you're day one in the military or even outside, like you want to get a degree or you want to pursue a profession, whatever it may be. What's your why is an important question to ask yourself and look inward, right? And your generation, myself and Brett, like our why or my why was I wanted to serve the nation, right? I wanted to do what my dad and his dad did, which was be a service member in the Navy. I wanted to serve, right? And once that basic levels of support, like we've talked about, fall off, and as we have a new generation coming in and they maybe see these things or they hear it or they see it on social media, it's going to impact recruitment.
Oh yeah.
And
because you
retention.
can't trust it.
And it's what's the incentive, right? Like, there's incentives for being in the military. You get a housing allowance. That's a benefit, right? You get healthcare insurance. But when those things start to fall at a point where it's not worth it, you are willing to accept, or I'm willing to accept, I'll be gone for a year. I'll be gone for X amount of days. Brett, you can probably speak on how long you've been gone in the course of your...
Yeah, so in 15 years, I've been gone for almost 7 years.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Right? So, whether it's TAD, whether it's workups, whether it's actually going on deployment, these things are real. So I have a 6-year-old now, but, at the time, when I was in San Diego, that was when I'm on 3rd deployment, and just workups. They were going to send us off to Hawaii for 6 months and then send us off to, I know everybody's like, oh, Hawaii, yeah, cool, but that's when you have a family, that is your world.
Yeah.
And so Hawaii, you could send me to anywhere you wanted to, but it's not home because my family's where my home is, right? So, again, my 6-year-old, I missed dang near half of her life. And so those are the sacrifices that we make, and those are the tough things that's the service that we were talking about,
Yes.
right? And so when you're talking about that sacrifice, people think that it should extend maybe to, just maybe some of the lifestyle things, but I find it to be quite the opposite. We here in the United States, and this is, my grandfather was one of the first Green Berets, and one of the things that, he was a Silver Star and a Gold Star, a recipient, so I looked up to that, and that honor and that sacrifice. He lost his brother. All of these things, and that does get me up in the morning. That's why I did what I did. But at the same time, the family is back home.
Yep.
The family is the one when you're doing it for others. And I don't mean to sound, like I'm some, sort of sacrificial, God at this point, but what I am saying is that we wake up to serve our family, and our family lives in that world. You served your family, you're serving your family, and just like you are, right? But when we go, we want to know
Our family's taken care
our
of.
family is good as gold, but it's not happening. And our families are suffering at an all-time rate, at least in the last 2 decades. And it's a hard thing to turn a blind eye to. And that's the reason why we're here right now. Because, again, I mean, heck, we all know I'm sure you guys heard stuff as far as housing, how much, it came out of a person's paycheck. Back in the 1980s, you're talking about maybe double or 2.5 times whatever your salary was. This was the cost of the home. But something I was watching Piers Morgan the other night he was talking to Donald Trump, and I know that's a hot name here, but the point being is that Piers Morgan made a point within 3 years. The common house that people were living in, the average house, was $358,000. Now it's $452,000 in 3 years.
Yeah.
This is reality. 33%, 40%, excuse me, for energy, 33% for your groceries. It just hits at all places. And so why the heck am I doing this? What am I doing? I can't even, my family's not good. So
Yeah, and then the bottom line is the family's not good, the service member's not good.
That's right.
I mean, it comes like happy wife, happy life, right? You can't be expected to go do your job at especially if you have a high risk job, and do it to a full capability when mama and the Cubs back home aren't doing well.
That's right.
And you have and it's like the little things, like are they going to be able to afford groceries this week? Are they going to be able to pay the bill? I mean, those things matter, and it's. Yeah, you want, and I know they, like you said, Secretary of Defense come out, we're focused on the warfighter and we're focused on, those are just words. It's like, okay, if you truly do believe that, then fix these issues that are going on. And it shouldn't be a slow roll the way it is. I mean, you guys have been going at this for a couple years now?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely felt it a little bit more so, but I mean, I was in San Diego when this happened. Of course, I leave, and I think they raised it like $890 because of some political issues. There was some things that were going on there that were going unheard of, and then it turned into a political issue. The reason why Eglin got that little bump that they did is because you had Matt Gaetz behind it.
Who's a monster? Yeah, he's a monster too.
He is. He did a nice little tweet out there in the Twitter sphere, and next thing you know, bada bing, bada boom, it's good.
Unfortunately, that is the way you have to get things done sometimes in the military.
The silver bullet that you were talking about is it just seems like in our culture now is that you have to yell, scream, whatever causes the attention, you become the squeaky wheel, which is not how the military rolls. That's not how I was bred to be. That's not how I was raised to be. And so this is actually outside of my personality, and I hate it. I can't stand it.
Comes down to leaders, right?
But what do
leaders do?
But also, okay, so let me ask you this: what is your job as a chief? A chief in general.
Your job as the chief is to take care of the mission, the job, and the men and women that work for you.
Yep.
Or with you, right? And that's a very simple couple words, which is all inclusive, right? That could be, are they paying their bills on time? Is the wife good at home? Is the baby in childcare so the member can come in and do their job? Like it's a all inclusive scope.
It's a heavy responsibility.
Responsible for everything to deal with not only your command, but also the men and women that work there and work with you. And it's not it's a great thing. Like him and I both, when I asked like, what's your why, what's my why, like our intent is we both want to retire from the service because we want to serve our nation. But at the same time, is the juice worth the squeeze? And although we still plan to hopefully retire at some point, I think that's the question that service members are asking themselves now. And that's why we are where we are with the retention rate. But in terms of like your question, what is a chief's role? That it's accountability, enforcing good order and discipline, as well as helping the men and women that you serve with. And I think that goes up all the way to the top.
Yeah.
We know our responsibilities as we come through the ranks. And I think that's where it is time for the senior leaders to step up. And like you said, words are many, right? And it's who can back words with action.
Exactly.
And it's time to do it now. And we're not here pointing fingers saying you did wrong. It's what can we do to fix it? Mm-hmm. What can we do to be a part of the solution and the progress moving forward? And, one of the things I wrote down here, I just want to read it to you guys. It's men and women are willing to give their all, but they're being defeated before they even get a chance to fight. Mm-hmm. And it hits home to me because of all the people I've sat down with, and it also saddens me because we are talking about the basics here. And when those basics aren't there and they're not met, how can we go fight? How can we be able to fight? Fight the best to our ability. We can't.
Well, I think, and this is, I think what you two are doing, when we talked about earlier, like the problems of recruitment, lack of inspiration. What you two are doing is inspirational, right? It's you guys are going out of your comfort zone. And just like you said, you're like, I don't want to be doing this, but it has to be done. Like this, unfortunately, is a gap that has to be filled. And who's going to do it, right? You guys are the ones that raised your hand. You're doing your job as a chief. Like there's no other explanation or like, oh, this could be, given to somebody else. Like this is both your jobs. You're taking care of the men and women below you and setting the example. And I think, do you guys do realize that? Like, I'm sure you have people that work with you, people that work underneath you that see the amount of work that you guys are putting in. And that is what drives the Navy. That's what, I know the saying in the Navy is like, the enlisted are the backbone, the chiefs are the backbone of the Navy, right? And I think I've seen that like ebb and flow throughout my career, right? Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's like the chiefs have nothing. Their balls have been cut off, and it's like you guys have no say. But the fact that you guys are stepping up right now and you've been fighting this for a couple years, and you're going to continue to fight. And I'm glad. I know it can be frustrating. I know, like just like you said, you're like, dude, I'm done. Like as you get to those points, especially in dealing with the government. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I know you guys will get.
I mean, you've been there.
Yeah, and it's a tough, and it's not for everybody. That fight is not for everybody, and I think that's what people don't realize. I think they think, oh yeah, you're taking on the government or whatever, and this and that. It's like, dude, it is a roller coaster of emotions that not a lot of people are built for, because there are the highs. The highs are highs, but the super lows are super lows, and if you do not have a good, like a good base of, like, this is what I believe in, and like basically, if you don't have a good backbone, then yeah, you'll crumble. And there's one thing that I've helped out, not just in my situation, because I give that's all my wife and my brother who freaking stood up there against the Navy, but we've helped individuals now through our foundation. And that's the one thing I tell guys and women that we help is like, you need to stand your ground. And like they will, whether it's the Navy, Army, Marines, and even like we help law enforcement.
Well, you helped one of our students that went through, what was that, 2 years ago now?
Dulaki,
yeah.
Yeah. Right. And that's the thing is like that we tell them, like, there are going to be points during this where you're going to want to give up, like, because the pressure, the amount of like scrutiny that's going to come against you for standing up for yourself is sometimes unbearable, but you can bear it. Like, you will get through it. It's just having to gut it out and have some grit and determination, and also having that belief, like, this is why I'm doing it. And it's not just, and especially in your guys' case, it's not just, you're not doing this for you. And I think that it's important to note as well, like the work that you two are doing, like you could literally just be like, nah, I'm just going to do my job as a instructor and, blow off this collateral duty, like, cool. But the fact that you guys have invested in this and continue to fight through this, as well as still being instructors, it says a lot about you guys and your character and
Integrity.
It also gives me faith in, like, yes, there are still dudes in the military who are willing to take care of the men and women below them and that are not thinking about themselves. Unfortunately, and I think in this society, and I saw it with a lot of the newer guys that came in, the thought process was, what's in it for me? What am I going to get out of this? And that's not why we joined to serve. I think we joined to serve to make sure the people around us are taken care of, our brothers to the right and left of us are taken care of, and you're last. Like that, that's the way I was brought up. It's, in the teams, I'm sure it's the same when you get done with dives. It's like, team gear, dive gear or whatever, and then your gear is like you should be taking care of yourself last. Everything else should be taken care of first.
Yep.
And that's what you guys are portraying that by doing this. it truly is like inspirational that you guys are doing this, and I know there's going to be a positive outcome of it. It's awesome to see.
Yeah.
Seriously.
We both appreciate the kind words, and it has been an uphill struggle, mentally and physically, and all of the emotions, right? But one of the things I've realized is everything does happen for a reason, and each one of these steps we take back leads to a new opportunity forward. And
Yep.
being able to sit here today and have this discussion, like it's something I made a joke of 6, 7, 8 months ago, and here we are today doing it. So,
Dude,
I'm hopeful. I'm positive. Him and I are both here to be a part of the solution, whatever that may be. And we're just thankful for the opportunity.
And not to mention the people that we're out here trying to speak for are also holding down the fort.
Yeah.
So they have our 6, and we're going to get theirs, and that's the whole meaning of this service, right? You got each other's backs, and that's what's beautiful about it. And as long as they're out there willing to fight for me, I'll fight for them. So the inspiration goes both ways. I've had amazing teams. I had the people that I serve with are some of the coolest people I've ever met, and that doesn't get said enough. But that's the reason why I'm truly here. Not because I'm some altruistic guy. It's just because I see guys that I truly do care about that are going through some things, and so it's time to step up.
What So I know you guys have some. You want to go over the what was it? The MO.
Yeah. So the MOAA is
MOAA. Yep.
It's an organization within DC that has passed a bunch of amazing legislation that helps active duty veterans, Spouses Employment Act. So I want to say they've been working on this for a few years now, but they currently have a bill that is being worked that would restore BH to 100%. So we have a link that we're going to attach, and it's basically to help support that cause. So as we talked about, BH now covers 95%. They're pushing to get it back to 100%. So that link can you can go on that link, put your name and your info, and you can help support that movement to restore it.
Heck yeah, we'll put that link out below when we release this podcast.
And then we also, we do want to continue like the outreach and trying to help the service members or even retired folks or veterans the best we can. So we did make an email address, which is fixBAH@restorethewarrior.org. And so, anybody that's got a story of, a hardship, like we'll take positive stories too, but, a story that's pay related or, military pay due to inflation has caused a hardship on their family. Like we'd love to hear, I'd love to help if I can and kind of get those stories and use them in the future if needed. So, again, we're trying to help be a part of the solution to a huge problem that's not just impacting us here, but it's
Countrywide.
across the country.
Yeah. Good on you guys. And
Yeah.
then as far as I know you're in touch with Dunn. Have you guys gotten in touch with Matt Gates or anybody like that?
So at the very beginning of this, I did make some landfall with. They have a military partner over there that works at their office. His first name is Travis. I forget. Sorry, Travis, forgot your last name. But that's about the extent of it. But Dr. Dunn's office with the deputy chief or with the chief and deputy chief Craig Williams and Nicole Smith, they've helped us out immensely. They've helped us out with some partnerships that are in the area of the Chamber of Commerce, just to kind of get the word out and kind of make things easier and more palpable, because it does affect quite a bit, but also come up with solutions like, hey, build more homes.
Yep.
How are we going to tackle this multifaceted problem? She's definitely. Nicole Smith has definitely been a very, very, very good advocate for us. And like I said, she's the deputy chief over there at Dr. Dunn's office. He has an amazing staff. But we've also talked and touched base with him, and he also talks to the subcommittees and committees and things that he's also done some outreach himself talking about this, and actually came to the dive school. Actually, our base at NAS, what was that, 2 weeks ago now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, he's definitely hard after it, and you know, it's been a good advocate,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, let's see if we can get some more.
Yeah.
I'll reach out. I got some connections, that see if more weapons you bring to bear, the better.
For sure.
Get the ball rolling faster. So
Our biggest piece is, what can we do to be a part of this solution? And we're all a team. We're all in this together.
Yeah.
One team, one fight. It does impact many, but as a collective, what can we do to collaborate and fix the issue for all the men and women that do decide to serve their nation?
nice.
Awesome.
Well, awesome. I appreciate you guys coming out. You guys got any finishing words? Here's one. What would you tell 18-year-olds or people getting ready to join? What advice would you give them?
Man.
Why don't you go first on that one?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I have kids. So, anything that you do, pursue with your whole self, mind, body, spirit. But also prepare that way. Don't come in thinking that the military is going to do that for you. It starts now, and the military will definitely. It has been a helpful tool for me. Like I said before, I needed to get my life straight. I mean, I had a past, and the military helped me along with that. So I have a lot of things to be grateful for the military. So you get out what you put in. Period.
Oh,
Yeah, that's good. I would say somewhat along the lines of what he said is the military in general provides a vast amount of opportunity, right? I think it's very beneficial. Looking back for me, it's beneficial to know who you are and what your priorities are, or where your morals lie. And the military obviously helps develop that too as you go on. But knowing who you are, what you want to do, like that's a big question to ask yourself at 18. That's why a lot of people join in general, right? But I would say, one of the things I wish I would have known better is don't always believe what you hear. I think it's a big one, right? And I look at some of the leaders I've had, and I've had a few good ones and a lot of bad ones, right? And I've tried to take everything I can possibly get from the great ones. But at the same time, in the bad leadership I've had, I've gotten a lot from them too.
I've always found I've learned more from bad leaders than good ones.
Yeah. It's the same for me, right? And again, the military is a great avenue to not only explore, travel, serve, meet fantastic people, be put in places where you never would imagine you would be stuck in, right? And as well as develop friendships and bonds that will last for a lifetime. And develop yourself, like serve your nation if you desire to, but also continuing to develop yourself with those good leadership traits and characteristics and morals as you get those good things from the leaders.
Yeah.
The bad ones, put those down as, hey, I never want to be that guy.
This is what I don't want
to do. You got to
do.
look back at them sometimes because it's hard not to be a hypocrite as you.
Well, yeah, for sure.
You got to look back and remind yourself, I don't want to ever be this dude. I don't ever want to do these things. And it helps you guide yourself daily, I think. So I'd say that's probably a pretty long answer for your question.
No, it was great. Yeah. Awesome. Well, dude, it was an honor having you both here.
Thanks for having us.
I'm looking forward to seeing this progress into a solution that it should have been a couple years ago. But I know that you guys are going to stay in the fight, and then I'll do what I can to help out as well.
Amen.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
All right.
Out.
Out.